We're looking at a number line. The point that corresponds with 0 on a number line is called the origin. It's the only point that I know of that has a special name. The numbers 3 and -3 are the same distance from 0 on the number line. They are each 3 units away, one to the left and one to the right. The distance between a number on a number line and the origin is the number's absolute value. Since distances cannot be 0, both 3 and -3 have an absolute value of 3. The most common way to express absolute value is shown below. The first equation is read, the absolute value of 3 is equal to 3, and the second equation is read, the absolute value of -3 is equal to 3. I know of no special name for those symbols. They're vertical lines, one on the left and one on the right. I just call them absolute value symbols. They are also grouping symbols. So in this expression, we do what's inside the absolute value first, which is 3 plus 42, or 45, and then we take the absolute value of 45, which is 45, and finally we do the subtraction to get 38. Every real number has an opposite. 0 is the opposite of itself. 5 pairs of opposites are shown here. The sum of a pair of opposites is 0. And now we have 6 equations. We have our 5 pairs, and then we have 0, the special case, because 0 is the opposite of itself. The letter n is used below to stand for any real number. It is called a variable. We read the equation, the opposite of n plus n is equal to 0. It's common to say -n plus n, but that gets a little confusing if n turns out to be a negative number. So it's better if we get in the habit of saying the opposite of n whenever a variable has a negative symbol in front of it. This is called the property of opposites, and it's read, the opposite of n plus n is equal to 0, or in words, a number plus its opposite is 0. Another name for this property is the additive inverse property. If n is a positive number, then the opposite of n is a negative number. If n is a negative number, then the opposite of n is a positive number. Here's an example. Find the opposite of n if n is 42. Well, this is pretty straightforward. We write 42, we put the negative in front, and our answer is -42. But this example is a little more complicated. Find the opposite of n if n is -42. Well, then we write -42. We put parentheses around it so that we can tell the two negative symbols apart. And now we're looking at the opposite of -42, which we know is 42. And here's yet one more example, a little more complicated. Evaluate the expression below for n is equal to -42, and we're trying to find the opposite of n, where of course n is a negative number, in this case 42. So when we substitute, we end up with 3 negative symbols. The one from the -42, the one that was in front of the n, and then the one that was in front of the parentheses. So we're looking for the opposite of -42. Well, we do the innermost part first, and we know that the opposite of -42 is 42. And then we have one more negative symbol, and that makes our final answer -42. Notice that when we have an odd number of negative symbols, then when we simplify, we end up with a negative number. And you'll find that when you have an even number of negative symbols in a problem such as this one, after you simplify, you should get a positive number. The sum of 0 and any number is the number. In other words, for any number n, n plus 0 is equal to n. This is called the additive identity property, and the number 0 is known as the additive identity. It is called the identity because when 0 is added to a number, the identity of the number does not change. Some textbooks call the additive identity property the property of 0 for addition or the addition property of 0. To summarize, the absolute value of a positive number is the number. The absolute value of a negative number is the opposite of the number. The absolute value of 0 is 0. And here's two properties. The property of opposite states that for any number, the number plus its opposite is equal to 0. And the additive identity property states that a number plus 0 is itself.